The Last Homicide, as you said, it's a two-part story. It's kind of a real throwback to the hard-boiled pulp, down and dirty detective stories. It's the premise is that there's a homicide detective, who's on the verge of retirement, and for his last case, he catches the murder of a mob boss's son. And these two mob bosses in this city are on the verge of war, and people are afraid that this is going to tip them over the edge into all-out gang warfare. And this is his last case, and he has to solve it to kind of stop that from happening.
Welcome to the Comics Cube, everyone. Today I'm joined by Frank Martin, who is doing a comic called The Last Homicide, which is launching on Kickstarter on April 6th. Hi, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just fabulous.
My first question is very simply, why comics? What was the spark for you and as a reader, and what was the spark for you as a writer?
I don't know. I think because you get into comics, not because you like comics, but because you like the characters that are in comics. Everybody gets sucked into the superheroes first, and they're like, yeah, Spider-Man, Batman, let me go read where they originally came from. And then that's kind of how you get into comic books. And then after you start reading them a while, you really develop a love for the medium and how different it is than either prose or from film, which is kind of like both ends of the spectrum. When you're watching a movie, everything's happening in real time. When you're reading prose, everything is done in your imagination. But when you're reading a comic, it's a little bit combination of the two. You don't have to imagine everything because it's static pictures. It's right there in front of you. But there's no fluid motion, so you still have to follow it like it's a regular story. So it's a very unique kind of medium that I was drawn into as a reader. And I was originally a prose storyteller with short stories and stuff. And I'm like, I like reading comics. Let me just kind of try writing them myself.
What's the difference?
The difference is there's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. The similarities of course, it's a good story is a good story, regardless of what medium it is. It's the basics of character and plot and setting. But the difference is in that when you're in prose, as a writer, it's all on your back, to develop the world, to get inside the characters' heads. You have to really carry the torch. It's a direct shot to the reader. Whereas in comics, you really are using your artist as a tool in a way to develop the story. They're filtering it through themselves because you're not actually drawing the stuff that they're going to see, but you're dictating it how it goes. You have to come to terms with the fact that you're not the main storyteller, the artist is, and you're just kind of guiding them in a direction.
And when it comes to that, when it comes to writing in general, not just in terms of comics, but who inspires you? Are you trying to channel anyone in particular?
I mean, I don't know about inspiration in general.
Or who influences you?
Specific. I'm always a huge Neil Gaiman fan, simply because, well, first off, he's a great storyteller. He does it so naturally and whimsically, how he develops his stories. But there's very few writers that have really triumphed in both mediums, prose and comics. I mean, more and more you see sometimes a lot of established writers are starting to write comics for the big two, or you see a lot of comic writers start to dabble in novels here and there. But it's rare to see a guy that triumphs in both, and he really does that. So I love reading both of his stuff, and I try to emulate a lot of it in as far as how impactful it is. He never swings and misses. He always makes contact.
He's one of the greatest writers who's ever lived.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to The Last Homicide, so this is launching on April 6th. It's part one of a two-part story. Tell us about The Last Homicide.
So The Last Homicide, as you said, it's a two-part story. It's kind of a real throwback to the hard-boiled pulp, down and dirty detective stories. It's the premise is that there's a homicide detective, who's on the verge of retirement, and for his last case, he catches the murder of a mob boss's son. And these two mob bosses in this city are on the verge of war, and people are afraid that this is going to tip them over the edge into all out gang warfare. And this is his last case, and he has to solve it to kind of stop that from happening. So it's a real love letter to the genre. You see a lot of it. You see a lot of the genre of those detective stories, especially nowadays. People use them to piggyback off into another genre. I like to say one of my favorite movies is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
It takes that kind of feel, but it throws into a comedy. Kind of screwball comedy. Also, another one is like Seven, but it really delves into that psychological horror aspect a little bit. Or another great one is Dark City. That's a little bit new, neo noir. It's got that dark fantasy, but it's rare that you see stories that are just so hard boiled that there's just detective murder mysteries like they had back in the golden age of Hollywood. So that's what I was really trying to encapsulate with this.
That's interesting because in comics, when the words hard boiled come to mind, a lot of people will instantly think of Frank Miller. But
Yeah.
even he would do it in such a way that dives off into another genre, like
Well,
samurai, ninjas, and
yeah, I mean, comics are prone to that fantastical storytelling. Sin City is a classic example. That it's down, it's dirty, it's gritty, but it's so over the top in a way that it doesn't really, it's not grounded. There's always that a little air of fantasy going. So one of the greats that does it is Brubaker too. He's a
yeah,
really good crime storyteller. One of my favorite crime comics is. Forget who writes it. I think Greg Pak writes it, or Greg Rucka does. Whiteout is
yeah,
another one.
Rucka.
It's a realistic story. There's no real fantasy or supernatural elements to it or over the topness. And yeah, those are the type of kind of writers that I'm channeling with this particular project.
Yeah, there was that short little wave back in the early 2000s of Bendis, Brubaker, and Rucka, and
Bendis is another one. He really he
yeah,
really he had a great one that came out not too long ago. What was it? The Murder United States. I forget what it's
yeah,
called, but
the
it
murder of
was
the United States of America, I think.
no, it was Murder Inc. versus United. I forget. United States of Murder Inc. or something like that. Anyway, the premise was that
These long
the
titles, man, these long titles.
I know. The premise was that the mob went to war with the U.S. and lost like a huge portion of the East Coast. So
Mhm.
it's like the U.S. has seceded this territory to the mob, and they kind of run the show over there. But even that's like hyper realism. Like that's never gonna actually happen. So it's a little wild.
So you talk about being inspired by the golden age of Hollywood. So I got two questions about that. Any
Sure.
particular films?
Uh, the one that always jumps out at me was Maltese Falcon.
Yeah, I was thinking of that
I
too.
Because I was assigned that to read in like middle school or something or high school, and I read the book, and it's not too like it's not too long, it's not too crazy going, so it was a good read for that time of my life. And I'm like, I gotta watch the movie, so that's kind of where I always go to. That's the classic uh gumshoe private eye kind of trying to crack the case story.
Yeah, that's when people say gumshoe private eye, even before I knew who Humphrey Bogart was, that was the stereotype that was in my mind, like
Yeah.
trench coat hat.
Yeah. Well, I went to when I went to San Francisco. They have like little spots that he went to in the movie. So I was kind of got a little fanboy kick out of that. My wife was like, what are you excited for? So
there's something there's something about Bogart too, right? Like it's just there's a whole presence and charisma to him. But
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say he embodies that. No, he does it so naturally. He doesn't even have to act.
Yeah, he barely even moves if you really look at him. Here's another question I have. You're talking about how when people do, hard-boiled stuff, they put it together with other genres. Why do you think the straight-up detective story has kind of fallen by the wayside?
Uh, I don't know. I think audiences have gotten numb a little bit to that kind of feel. and they're expecting something bigger, something grander, something more. And it's also the creators, writers too, are trying to push boundaries, trying to do something bigger, trying to do something greater, trying to do something more. So, I mean, I appreciate that as a creator and writer, that you're always experimenting, trying new things, trying to go bigger, trying to go greater, and trying to combine stuff. But there's also something to be said about boiling a story down to its roots, you know,
Hmm.
and not going too crazy and trying to really get to the essence of what a genre is about, and put your own twist on it while trying to be original and not trying to copy people or emulate people. And it's a challenge, you know, especially after so much time has passed. It's really hard to be original, especially when you're not combining different elements. So I appreciated the challenge of trying to do that with a two-part comic.
That's interesting because at this point, there's been so few of that straight up thing that it comes off as new again.
A little bit, yeah. Everything
Yeah.
come back around. It's cyclical.
So much of comics is about the visuals, but also so much of noir in general is about the visuals. So you want to talk about your art team here a little bit?
Sure. I had Pietro Vaughn did, it was the artist. Eugene Patovu was the colorist, and I had Tobin Racicot did the letters. I've started lettering my own stuff, but yeah, I brought him on to kind of to work on this book, and together we worked great. I mean, we were in a kind of working through a Facebook chat, you know, throwing stuff back and forth, and I think you could really tell how the art and the colors go together with the cover. You know, the cover really embodies that feel of that kind of noir detective, the aspect of it, that pulpy feel. And it's a little bit of an Art Deco flair there. So I really I love the cover just because it immediately gets you in the feel for what this book is about.
It looks like the cover of a classic paperback.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, one of
So
those Raymond Chandler type paperbacks.
yeah, it's one of those things where you look at it and you immediately know what you're gonna get inside the book. You know, you can't be surprised that no monsters are gonna pop out or stuff like that. You look at it and you know this is gonna be a detective story.
Is that Pietro who did the cover?
He did, and Eugene colored it.
And
So
Eugene colored it.
it's the
It's
interior art team that worked on the cover as well.
it's a great concept for the cover. I think the dead body and then the silhouette walking away from it. But the thing that really makes it for me is the upside down reflection of the city in what looks like blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, was that straight up from his
I
mind?
had no input
No
whatsoever.
input whatsoever.
Oh, they took it and I gave them an idea of what I wanted, as far a feeling of what I wanted. I didn't want like an ensemble cover with all the pieces. I wanted them to really embody the spirit and the feel of the genre while being a little bit abstract, and they kind of nailed it. I have also a variant cover that's available. Um, let's see. I'll try to throw it in there so you could at least see it. That's done by Luke Cooper, who's a buddy
Okay.
of mine. You know what? I don't have it on this computer. Sorry.
Not a problem. You can
But
send it to
no,
me after this.
yeah. So Luke is he's a good buddy of mine. He is one that delves into that. He's a big noir guy, but he throws into his main book is called Hollow Girl, and it's a supernatural book, you know. So I tried to say let's just go straight noir with this because I know you love this kind of stuff. So he had a blast with it. He's got kind of a dark figure with a flashlight, shining the light on a guy holding up a bullet, which is kind of close to what happens in the story. And also as part of the Kickstarter, I have a exclusive noir version of the main cover that we were talking about. So there's no it's just Pietro's inks. There's no color on it, and it's a virgin color. So the cover. So there's no type on it. There's no logo or anything. It's just the black and white.
That's interesting. I want to see how it looks like in the black and white because a lot of this is color holds. So, um, so how would the blood show up on the body? It's just in
I don't think
red.
it does. I don't think it does.
Okay.
I don't have it in front of me, but I would have to take a look at it. But you know, I thought it was a very well done without the colors. So I wanted to offer that as kind of like a Kickstarter exclusive that you won't be able to get it anywhere else.
How does do you know who Pietro in particular is influenced by? Like, is there any particular artist that he's trying to that he's
I,
got in
I
mind for this?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but anybody who's read the book so far has really told me that they dig the art because it really gets them in that kind of
Yeah.
detective pulp mood. So they always compliment them.
The art is really good. I think the colors end up rounding it out a lot. The color choices in this book are pretty bold, I think, and I feel like it really goes a lot into a long way into setting the mood for the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, I'm working with Eugene on another story. It's more of a horror aspect, so it's cool to see the difference in how he approaches the colors in this kind of slow-paced, kind of slow burn detective crime story, and then taking it over to a horror monster story. He's able to swing in the other direction and do something completely different. So yeah, I think he really is able to nail the feel and the tone of the book through the colors.
That's interesting. Does he put himself in a different mindset? Do you know? Or and
No, I
okay,
sent it to him, and I sent him
he works his magic.
I guess so, because the on that other book, when I showed it to the artist for that one, he said he really nailed my art with his colors. So I guess he's very good at kind of being a little chameleon there and shifting back and forth depending on what the art is and what the book dictates.
And the last homicide, I find it interesting that this is the last case, and that would imply that you're not going to continue this after the second book. Would that
Oh,
implication be correct?
for this particular series, yes. My last launch on Kickstarter was a sci-fi book that was also a two-parter, and I always got that question: is there more going to be in this world? And with that one, it's left open, so there's definitely a chance. But for this one, the way it's going to end in part two, uh, there won't be a homicide after the last.
After the last homicide, it is going to be what it is. And when would book two end up being launched? Do you already have a
Book
date?
two will probably end up being launched next year, I believe, or it will be either November this year or January of next year.
Okay, so around a 6 month,
Yeah.
6 or 7 month difference. How do in comics, and I feel like this has been something that mystery writers in comics have had challenges with. I had Leah Moore, Alan Moore's daughter, on the show, and she did a bunch of Sherlock Holmes comics.
Mhm.
And one of the things that she said was a challenge was making sure that in the comics, everything that you need to know to solve the mystery is already out there on the page. But the page, with comic book storytelling, it would be easy for somebody to end up spotting all the clues. So how do you end up building up the suspects and laying out the clues for your readers here? Is it a challenge?
Uh, a little bit, a little bit. So, comics are unique in that when you're telling a story, you have a partner who's really picking up the ball and taking it for you. So when you're writing a script to communicate to that artist, you want them to be in on it. You want them to be in on the mystery, and you got to tell them right off the bat uh, who the killer is or what was stolen, or you want it that there can't be any surprises for the artist. But at the same time, you're writing in a way that you need to tell them to pull back those secrets so that they're not giving it away. So it's very hard to script in putting on both of those hats, letting your artist in on the joke while at the same time describing what they need to draw so that the reader's not in on the joke. So it's a little bit of a balancing act when you're scripting. For me, I worry more not so much about the visuals of the twist as far as the leading the reader through the plot. I'm not going to put certain aspects in there to kind of lead the reader along the way through visual cues, but I definitely am more I use the story to lead them in certain directions and then twist it another way, if that makes any sense.
That makes sense. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the number of characters as well, because
Yeah.
as we know in these things, anyone is a suspect.
Murder mysteries are tricky, and I really, when I was thinking of devising this plot, I was watching different murder mysteries and stuff like that, because murder mystery is always going to be a character that you're introduced to. You know, you're never going to be like, it was this random guy that was walking down the street who we've never seen before. Like that's kind of boring. Nobody wants that. They want to be surprised that this person was the killer all along. So it's a little bit difficult because you only got X amount of pages and you can only introduce so many characters. You know, in a 20-page book, you're not going to introduce 17 people that could possibly be the killer. So it's it's definitely challenging, but you want to try to create a drama-filled scenario so that the reader's so muddled in the drama itself that they never see it coming.
And what do people get when they pledge?
So the way I have it is I always have a digital tier available for people that don't want print or they don't want to, or the international backers don't want to pay for the shipping. I always have a digital tier. And then I always have a little bit more. I have a digital deluxe tier. So in this instance, I have a digital deluxe tier that will include the book as well as some crime short comics that I've written, some digital short comics. And then those are available throughout every tier above it. So if you get the print book, you'll get those 2 short comics too. As I mentioned, I have tiers for the variant cover as well as the Kickstarter exclusive noir. And then I got tiers that for all the covers that you could grab. I got commissions available for the art team. I always make a commission tier available for me personally to write people's story, whether it be a detective story or something else. And I always get 1 or 2 people that grab that. That's kind of cool. I do that because I'm jealous of artists that can just, people say, draw me this. And they're like, okay. So I'm like, I want to get mine. So I have that available.
Do you have a limit to the number of pages for your story, for your commission story?
My story, I typically leave it at 1,000 words.
Okay.
1,000 words. So what else? Oh, I have a buddy of mine that I commission for a theme song for every book that I do. So that's part of it as well.
Wait, a theme song?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so he developed I sent him over the book and he's very good. I've been working with him for years. So I say, read it, get in the mood, and then make a little score. So he put together like a old school kind of golden age of Hollywood noir detective little theme to be that you could play while reading it. I have a sample on the Kickstarter page too, so if people want to know kind of what it sounds like. So it's cool. It really adds something to the campaign.
Very cool. And you're talking about, so throughout this whole interview, you've mentioned all of the other stuff that you've done, the other stuff that you're doing. Do you want to give a quick shout out and plug to those things?
Sure. My most recent campaigns, last October, I did a book called The Macabre Motel, which was a one-shot kind of surrealist horror book, very Twilight Zone inspired. My last book was in January, was a sci-fi adventure tale called The Polar Paradox, which is kind of a deep sea adventure book about going to the kind of the center of the earth or going underneath Antarctica and unraveling a mystery there. And that's a 2-part book. So the first part was in January. The next part will be coming like June, July-ish. So yeah, you can find me at frankthewriter.com is my website. I got a bunch of free stories there too, store. And I'm also at Frank the Writer, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's very easy. So you can find me there, plugging all my stuff.
Yeah, I'll put all your links down below as well. Yeah, okay. I think those are all my questions. That went fairly quickly.
Yeah, we blow through them. It was cool. We kind of went around the world and back again.
I know. We got through all of them. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Frank. This was great. I hope I wish you best of luck for the last homicide.
I appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye-bye.